Welcome back. Today we want to work on our first application. So I give you first the problem and then we think about how we could implement that in Python. On the way we learn many more functions, many more ways of working in Python, including the input function, list comprehension, the zip loop and so on. So let the fun begin. The coding challenge is as follows. We want to build a takeaway menu ordering system. So the idea is that a customer can interact in the terminal with our Python script and can give an order. Then the order is stored and would be then transmitted to a restaurant. And the final bill is presented. So that's basically what I want to implement. So a bit of interaction using the terminal, nothing too fancy. There's not any graphical user interface yet. We don't do any website at the moment. But a nice example of how to use the things we discussed, including lists, then branching, loops and so on. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, let me just put here author data nerd, so that's me. Good. Okay, so the first thing that would be useful is we have to kind of store information about the food items. Now we learned about many containers, so many ways of storing data. We talked about tuples, lists, sets and so on. So there are many options. So what I suggest is not the only way of doing it. So please feel free to try something else and just leave a few comments below if you have better solutions, and I'm sure you will have better and quicker ways of doing it. So what I suggest is to simply store the food items in a list. I just call this the food list, and I store a few items there. You don't have to do the spacing and all of it, but this is kind of it's kind of nice. It's a very common thing you see in code when it comes to specifying lists. So for instance, we might have some Italian takeaways or some pizza here, and we might have obviously some pasta. And because here it might be UK based, we have some burgers. You know, you can't have a takeaway without some nice burgers. Why not? Yeah, it's always a good combination. The next thing we need, because we have to give the bill to the customers, we need to somehow relate prices to the food items. Again, there are many different ways you could do this. You could do a dictionary, for instance, where you can look up prices depending on the type of food item. Or you could identify the respective price by an index position. Yeah? So what I thought about is I use also a price list. Now the first thing is I want to have a bit of interaction going on. So it would be nice to have something on the terminal. So we just do a print statement here. Like a welcome message. Let's do this. Welcome to, and then the name of the restaurant. I do cheap cuts. And the next thing which would be good to have is to start the interaction to ask for someone's name. So just type in input and then in the argument you put basically the question. So here for instance I put something like enter your name and then we make a bit of space and put the quotation mark, because of course we're operating here in strings. Now let me just run this and see what happens, and now you see in the terminal it pops up, welcome to cheap cuts, enter your name, and here we are. So I can just put in my name, so here we are, and execute. Yeah. But of course nothing else really happens because, well, I put in the name but I did not assign anything. So for instance I can call it name. So I just do name is equal to input. The variable would be name and then you see the type is string. Now this is important, so whatever you input, it's important to note it's always a string. Even if you put in any integer, for instance, if you put in name 77, it's still a string. So if you want to ask someone for a numeric input, you have to take this name variable and have to convert using maybe the integer function. Good, the next thing is now we just now start making the order. So make the order. We could use it in a list again. So we do an order list, if I can spell it correctly. And we start with an empty list. So what I suggest to do is we go through our food items and simply ask, well, do you want some pizza? Do you want some pasta? Do you want any burgers? And if this person says, yes, I want that, then ask how many. Now, how to implement this? The obvious thing to do is to now use a loop and loop through this list of food items and simply ask questions for each and every item. So you could do something like for food in food list. I would then ask different questions. So you could ask here an order question. So again, you have to assign an object. So I call this order. And here we do another input. Now I could refer to the name of a customer because I already stored this in names. So I do a formatted string. So the F goes in front. We have used this before. I use the wavy brackets as a placeholder and put in name. So this will show me the name of the person. So here I would say, yeah, do you want, so whatever, Gerhard, do you want this food item? Again, the food item is a placeholder here for food because we loop through the list. Question mark here, and we just give, we suggest here the options yes or no. Okay, so what is your name? Okay, let's do GK, this is shorter. And now you see here, GK, do you want pizza? Yes, no. Well, I say yes. And pasta? No. Burger? No. Done. Of course, now we haven't done an awful lot more. We stored the order, but then of course we always reassign it. So now actually what we want to do something with it. So of course we basically want to do the following. So if the order is actually a yes, we want to ask, well, how many items? So if order is equal to yes, and yes is simply that as a string, then we want to ask now how many items do you want. Yeah, so we do another object. I just call this num for the number, so to speak, and we do another input function and we do another formatted string here. So then you can ask here how many pizzas or pasta items, put an S here, do you want? Then of course, depending on what this person types in, you could then add this to the order list. Yeah, so you would you go through the list of food items, and the index position would indicate what kind of food item it is. Yeah, so the first item on that order list would be, of course, your first item on your food list. So you can do the order list append. So we use the append method here, and we just throw in now number. Now you have to be careful. So if you do this, if you just add number, there is of course the catch, as we saw before, that the input function always assumes it's a string. Obviously in here, if I put in an actual number, which would be an integer, that should be an integer. Yes, if I want to work with it later, it would be useful to convert this into an integer. So I use the int function on my number object. Yeah, so on num. So that should give me an integer if I put in the integer correctly. So that would be the one way to implement that. Let's just run this and see what happens. Okay, so enter your name, GK. So do you want any pizza? I say yes. How many pizzas do you want? Let's do 7. Any pasta? Yes. How many do you want? Say 21. Any burgers? No, thank you. It's enough. Okay. And now what you see is in the order list you get a 7 and you get a 21. So what you need to do is you have to assign the value 0 if the person doesn't want the item. Yeah, so we have to be careful here. So whenever this is not the case, so I have to say an else, we have to assign 0. Yeah, so that's important. Let's do that. So what you see is this important process of running your code several times, thinking about it. Did I really think about all the eventual issues? So is that actually the right way to implement that? And so that's an important point to note. Let's run it one more time. Okay, GK. Any pizza? No. Any pasta? Yes. I want to have 2. Burgers? Yes, please. I have 1. Okay, so now you have, as expected, 0 to 1. So that's good because it's now matching our food items, it's matching our price list, so that works fine. There is again one more catch. What if people put in invalid input? It is something you have to think about. Yeah. So because here, for instance, I can just put in some rubbish input. Yeah. So I could do the following. So again, I just put in some nonsense input, another nonsense, and here I put yes and I put 4. Yeah, and that, of course, at the moment, so any nonsense I put would go into the else statement, regardless what it is. The issue there is, well, you might have made a mistake typing in. Yeah, so it's not ideal to throw this all into the else. So it might be a good idea to do something like this. Do an elif, and we have spoken about the elif. So elif order is indeed now here no. So if you explicitly say it's a no, then we basically go in here and we say, okay, well, we append. Yeah. If you put in something else, actually, it might be useful to say something like, well, sorry, you didn't type properly. Yeah. So here we say sorry, and then we put your name here. So that's quite useful. Let's run it one more time. So again, your name, GK. Do you want any pizza? Blah, blah. Okay, so you get here, sorry, I do not understand you. It moves to the next item. Yeah, that's not really good because ideally you want now this person to have a chance to correct. Yeah, so this is something where we have to think again. So it's not ideal. We don't yet, I think, nail it here. So how can we do this? So how can we basically go back and ask again? So what you could do, and that's just one idea, is to run the whole order in a while loop and to check whether the input is valid. So what we could do is after the for statement, we put in an order incomplete, or order invalid or something like this, and we set this equal to true. So basically, as long as this is true, the while loop will run. And now we do a while loop, while order incomplete. So while order incomplete, we now run the loop. Of course, be careful, indentations, we mark all of it, we do the tab, and we move it all into the while loop. Now we basically switch off this while loop inside. Yeah, so if you give a valid response, we change it. So here, for instance, in here, so if you say yes, well, then of course the order is then complete. Yeah, so you say false. Yeah, this would switch off the while loop. If you say no, again, that's a valid response. So you get, again, a false. So this will interrupt the while loop. So now you are in the process of programming, where you really think through the workflow. You think, okay, have I considered all the cases? And this is exactly how I tend to work all the time. I start with a problem, and then I try it out, and I think about it, and I modify it. Okay, so again, enter your name, GK, do you want any pizza? And now you do gibberish, yeah? So not a valid input, it should go into the else statement. So you get, sorry, GK, I don't understand you, and you go back to pizza, you see that it goes back. So again, I gibberish. It goes back, no, it's a valid one, it goes to pasta. Yes, how many pastas do you want? 67, I'm hungry. Any burgers? Oh yes please, some burgers, I take another 8. Good, done. And now you have the order list 0678. Yeah, so that looks good. Now it would be quite nice to show the order again to the customer and then to display the price. So that's the last thing we would like to do. So we do another print statement here, and which is just another formatted string. We could do a line break, it's quite nice to do this, so this is useful to display it nicely, thanks. And then we put in your placeholder here and the name, so thanks, the name for ordering, and then we can go into the order. And now of course we might have yeah, different items here. We have of course the order list and we have a food item. So basically we cannot go through this list. So we could do something like the following. We can say order list and 0 is the first position. So this gives me the number of pizzas and then of other food items and so on. Good, so again, what's your name? Okay, GK, any pizza? No. Pasta? Yes. 1. Burgers? Nope. Gibberish? Yes, a burger. 5. Thanks GK for ordering 0 pizzas, 1 pastas and 5 burgers. Okay, so that's pretty okay. I think I'm quite happy with it. It's not perfect, the grammar isn't great, but you know, that's me. I'm into data science. Okay, the last thing which would be nice to do is now to get to the price list. Now there are many different ways again to implement this. One thing which I haven't discussed before is the SIP. SIP is pretty cool, in particular if you work with 2 lists. Yeah? So we have here our order list, so this is the number of items, we have our price list, and the SIP lets me run through this line by line, so index position by index position. And so what I do is I multiply the number of orders and the price, and then I add it all up together. So what I want to do now is I want to show you a list comprehension. I just call this now the new list. So the new list would be basically a price list. So you take the price of your item times the amount, and this gives you the total amount for each and every food category. List comprehension uses the rectangular brackets. And then I run through the different terms. Yeah, so here, for instance, I do order. I call this order, so this is the number of items times price. So I multiply the order with the respective price for order price in SIP. And the SIP in here is the order list. Just take that, and then we have our price list. So what that does is the following. So that's a so-called list comprehension. You do lots of things in one line of code. Yeah, so you take the order. So this is the number of items you order times the price, going through both lists at the same time, using the SIP starting from index position 0, going to 1, going to 2. So that's the notations, so that's basically what it does. So that's a slightly more complex way of thinking, but it gives you a new list which basically multiplies the 2. So here we go. I will show you that. So GK, we want to have 1 pizza, we want to have 1 pasta and nothing else. So here we are, and now we have a new list which simply gives you £10 for the pizzas, £7.5 for the pastas. And then the last thing we have to do is we have to sum it all up. And then we have the total order value. That's the idea. So basically we can put this into total price. And we just have to put the sum function over the list, and that will actually do it. Yeah, so it's getting a little bit more complicated. And we do another formatted string here. Please pay Great British Pound and whatever the money is, and this is here the total price. If I can spell it. So now we are pretty much done. We do it one more time. So again, put in my name gibberish. I will be asked again. I say yes to pizza. I put 3 in. Yes to pasta, 6. And yes to burgers. Why not? I'm hungry. Another 3. And I have to pay £90. My gosh. Okay.